Hello, Aaron Kupitz, personal trainer at Functional Aesthetics CC. Just popping in here real quick with a thought I just had in regards to building muscle, getting stronger, things of that nature. Kind of what my business is about. Not entirely like to the extent of like powerlifting and like competitive bodybuilding, but definitely have a kind of strength bent. Although I consider my style more of a hybrid style of training and functional bodybuilding. So where I incorporate numerous different elements of fitness disciplines, but basing everything off of the foundational movement patterns. So you'd have, your hinge movement. So like if you're doing deadlifts, you have, horizontal pushing, vertical pushing, horizontal pulling, vertical pulling, the lunge pattern, and then twisting, and and then ultimately your running mechanics and things like that. So once you have that foundation built, then you can branch out and do like more isolation type work and things like that. So building your at least your strength training routine around that, and having kind of the base of your training being around strength and conditioning, and then adding in cardiovascular exercise around that. And depending on your genetic makeup, the size of your frame and your bones and things like that, you might do a little bit more cardio, if you're more slight of build and you excel at that kind of thing. And you might do a little bit more strength training and maybe circuit training for your cardio if you are somebody who excels at like strength training, like a power lifter type or something like that. And then anywhere in between, okay? So with that being said, I was thinking like recently I had a guy. He was actually the guy that I rent space out from for my gym, and he was asking me, he's like, how do I, develop my chest, get more definition in my chest, and everything. And he wanted to know specifically what exercises you could do. And yes, definitely there's, different ways you can train your chest, but a lot of, what comes down to for like definition for your chest and building more of that, really, as far as even just, it comes back to that old thing about like spot reduction versus like, holistic, the global fat reduction of the body, and that, doing more push-ups or more bench presses or more chest flies or any variation of chest exercise isn't necessarily going to create more definition. It also comes down to diet, also hormone levels, which are influenced by what you eat, how you're sleeping, your stress, and then also the training style, too. So there's a lot of different variables involved there. But the one thing that I wanted to touch on, and one thing that I noticed in my own training, and it actually, how I came upon this realization was actually after getting a shoulder injury due to, training when I was under a lot of stress and depleted and whatnot. So anyway, I got the shoulder injury, had to take several months off from any sort of pressing exercises and do some exercise for, focused a lot on training my back, focused a lot on shoulder mobility exercises. All right, so my video cut out, so this will be part 2 here. I think I'm running low on storage on my phone, but kind of splicing this together. So anyway, after that injury, I was focusing on all those things, and what I noticed is that actually my chest started getting leaner, not training it as much, right? Which is kind of weird, right? And then when I did go back to actually training, I actually, after, the preparatory phase of just kind of building, kind of working back into your routine, after a couple weeks, I actually was breaking some of my previous records, even though I hadn't been doing a lot of, chest specific exercises or anything like that. My bench press went up by about like 20 pounds in about the first month back to training. And I thought, wow, this is kind of weird and this is kind of interesting. All right, so part 3 in this video here. So basically what I came to this conclusion, that it's almost similar to when you're compressing a cylinder or something, or you can, like if you're squeezing a sponge, right? Initially, when you first squeeze the sponge, you're going to get a lot out of it, right? And then as you continue squeezing that sponge, you're going to get less and less water coming out of that sponge, right? And until you hit that peak contraction and you can't squeeze any harder. It's basically there's no more to squeeze, right? And so the same thing happens, I believe, with the body, right? And this is almost, I think, where the concept of deload goes in there as well. So you're training the muscle, and you start out initially with that lighter load, higher volume and stuff, and then you start slapping more weights onto the bar, and you start, increasing that over time. And then finally, when you get towards the end of, your where you're hitting those heavy weights and stuff, and you're feeling pretty awesome about this, but you're kind of, again, hitting that peak point in your training. So when you hit that peak point in your training, you've compressed this muscle, and now, at least in my mind, it's like when you take that break and you let the foot off the gas for a little bit, and you spend more time on stretching those muscles and training your back, and not doing so much for that, you're essentially, it's like allowing the water back into the sponge, right? And so when you do that, your body has the capacity to fill back up again. It would be like, if you're squeezing the sponge out, and you squeeze it all the way out, and then you let it back off a little bit, and you squeeze it again and stuff, is not allowing it to fully regenerate itself before you're coming back, let alone make compensations and recover more than that and stuff. So it's always important, if you're getting to a stage where you feel like either your fat loss or your muscle gains or anything like that is not progressing how you would like it to, that it might be time to, instead of pushing harder, take a step back and take some time to recover instead. All right, guys, thanks for watching.